VT1W6TS Rasp Novice. Okay, here we go. So, 1-0 VT, of course, voltaic. 1W6TS is 1 volt, 6 targets small. And the Raspberry Novice variation, specifically for this playlist. The benchmarks of the Novice voltaics. So, how do you play this scenario? Let's start with the basic how to play. First one is you look at a single target. You literally move your eyes onto a target. I don't have an eye camera, so you just have to imagine the motion, like really move your eyes, lock your eyes on one target, look at it. Don't just look at the center and the general picture, focus on one eye. Like if you look at the scenery, you can focus on one item and you really focus it, or you can just look at the broader image. They're kinda, there's a difference in perception and you really want to focus down on one specific point somewhere on the map. Then you want to make one big flick, mostly with your arm, onto the target. This big flick is, now to the top right, you really try to stop on the target. Okay, so now the most bottom one, whoop, stop on the target. Whoop, stop on the target. Whoop, stop on the target. And you see, I cannot actually hit it, and that is fine. You still try, but you cannot do it because the target is so small, and you want this movement to be fast. So, for this, a mistake would be to make something like this. They're all mistakes. They all look kind of unclean or something. Like maybe you're not doing a straight line. Maybe you're just making a circle motion would be a typical error. Maybe you kind of speed up and then goes down, and really at the end you kind of slow down to really reach it. Maybe you have kind of like a sloppy spiraling motion. Maybe you go so fast that you kind of cannot stop, and then you have like this rubber bandy motion at the end. Reduce all of that. Try to make this as clean as possible. Like one straight line, zip, with the maximum speed you can go, that you can still control while stopping. Zip, 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 zip. Okay. Always try to hit the target, and then if you have figured out what your maximum speed is, you go slightly faster. So you see, I have a very slight additional motion there in the end, because I go a little bit faster than I actually can, and that is because, well, the target size, and you kind of don't want like 100% accuracy, then you can go fast. You want to have like a high accuracy, like 95, 98%, like really high accuracies. Let's see what the pros are doing. Yeah, you see, I have, my run is 96% accuracy. Yeah, the pros are actually something between 90 and 100%, I would say. So some go for 100%, some go for something 90%, some go for 95%. So, but a rather high accuracy, right? And this is for the both motions. Then, so we had step 1, looking. Step 2, big flick with your arm. And then for the third step, you stop, and that's where you end. And then you kind of look where your crosser is. So you switch from looking at the target to looking at where your crosser is stopped. And then you make a precise macro correction motion. And while the first big motion is with your arm, if you have a claw or fingertip aim, after the arm motion, you plant your wrist. So you plant your wrist here, rather where your palm is, and then you make the final motion with fingers and wrist. So wrist, of course, going left and right, and fingers going up and down. If you are claw, your range of motion might differ, but it's still roughly the same. Then you have, of course, you cannot plant the wrist so well if you're like a claw grip. Then of course you still have to move your mouse. I'm not a claw grip aimer, so you see it's a little bit sloppy now for me. But then you still need to move your wrist for a little bit, but it's still a different motion than this to compare to this. So even then, kind of like, yeah, it's just hard to say. It's just how much you plant your wrist and your arm on the mouse pad changes depending on how much friction you actually want for this specific type of aiming. Now, additionally, I want to add, if you have like a very high-speed, fast pad, like this glorious Helios I have down here, it's always a little bit dusty because it's below the other mouse pad. You basically can never fully stop. You see the mouse is always kind of floating. These mouse pads are not stopping whatsoever. You see this last bit of flakiness, and still try to calm down and stop it just as good as you can. And the stopping takes longer and it's more awkward. And that is why this type of fast pad are ideal to actually train your stopping power from muscles. Of course, if you have like a pure control pad, a very slow pad, it stops automatically, but then you're not training to stop. That's actually bad for you. Bad for your training, but perfect for high school run, and this is our benchmark, so this is a high school run. So for high school runs, basically control pads are better for this specific reason, that you can actually stop and you are not floating. Like same would happen if you have like a glass feet. It would also kind of always stay at this floaty state and never really stop. Okay, so look, really focus, narrow down your sight, make big flick, change sight onto the crosshair, and set 3, micro correct onto the target. The micro correction needs to be really clean. Like the blick is, the fast flick is wherever, but then the micro correction is really bzzzt, bzzzt, bzzzt. Like really one straight line, stopping perfectly. It's not a fast motion. It's still the fastest you can control, but you want to have a really high control on the last, on the micro correction basically. Then step 4 is, after the micro correction, you look on the crosshair. You ask yourself, is your crosshair on the target? If yes, then you click. And now it's important here that you do not click whenever and then click, oh, is it still alive, and then correct back. You really want to flick, micro correct, look, click, and then go to the next one. Like you saw me in the benchmark run doing sometimes like being close and then making a double click. It's hard to simulate like this. I can't even simulate like something like this. So you see sometimes I do this double click, and this is a mistake, okay? This is something I do wrong myself. After the click, you're already on the next target. So right when you click, you're already looking on the next target. So the last click and looking on the target is going hand in hand, because you confirm it's crossed on target, and then the clicking is already blind. The clicking itself is it's done. You already go to the next target. So you have no chance to confirm that you actually have killed the target or not. And you do not care. If the target is still alive, then it's still alive. You don't care. You go next. There's no going back. Okay. Now there is one exception to this rule, and I think I will try to prepare the battlefield for this last exception by clicking the most outward target. So now you see I have clumped up the targets. Let's see if I can get the last one also getting closer. Now, close enough. Okay. Now you have sometimes situations where these targets are clumped up like this, or even closer to each other, where it would be awkward to make a big flick onto this target with your arm. Like I do not even need to remove my wrist. Like this is within my wrist motion. I don't need to remove my shoulder for this. If I move my shoulder for this, the motion becomes bad, right? And with this type of scenarios, you kinda skip the first step, the big flick. You just do the controlled motion basically. If they are so close to each other, you just do the close motion. So you make a big flick to the group, and then micro correction 1, micro correction 2. Big flick, micro correction 1, micro correction 2, micro correction 3. Big flick, micro correction 1, micro correction 2. Big flick, micro correction 1, micro correction 2. Now, the thing with this is that this will boost your score immensely. And it's called chaining, by the way. So you just chain these things. And you can even take this one step further, that you do not stop on the target, you roll over the targets. So you never stop your crosshair, you just roll over the targets. And this can also boost your score. I just want you to be mindful, because this is kind of cheating. Because this depends mostly how lucky you are with the ball placement, and so you will get a higher score, but the score is kind of cheated, because you can only replicate it if the balls randomly clump together. Good for you. And so if you do 1,000 runs, you have one insane high score run, but then you can replicate it and you know, okay, this one run was mostly cheated, and then you kinda don't want to rely too much on this high scores, and you kinda want to repeat it in where you don't train too much. Like, of course, if the balls are falling close range to each other, you still train, of course, you take it if you get it, right? You just have to be mindful about your own level. Like, don't boast about your high score if you just got lucky in training, and yeah, well. And that's, of course, not too much of a skill. And remember, you do these benchmarks for yourself. Like, there is no point in lying to yourself about your own skill. Like, if you have constantly these clamped up targets, the shots are insanely faster than flick, micro-correct, flick, micro-correct, flick, micro-correct. You just hear from the sound. Just hear from the sound. This compared to this. Of course, the clicking speed goes a lot faster, but you're kinda cheating. Okay. So these are the things I want to add. Now, we have discussed how you should do it. Then I also want to discuss some things that you might want to do to train it, even though this is just a benchmark score, benchmark run, which is not specifically for training. But remember, in the beginning, you want to repeat these benchmarks until, as long as it's easy to get a new high score. As long as it's easy to get a new personal best, you continue this benchmark scenarios, and then at some moment you will plateau, and that's when you start to take your level, and then you start training. Because even if a good player, Overwatch Diamond player or something, above average player would do this scenario for the first time, he would maybe not get the highest possible score, and then he goes and trains the iron playlist of full takes, and that of course would not represent his level and not represent his level of training that he wants. Do this scenario as long as it's easy. So one mistake I want to correct is try to go in straight lines. So really, imagine a line that's drawn from your target to the next target and go to this. Imagine a line drawn and really try to follow this line as good as possible. And of course, don't do it so slow, but do it fast. So you still do fast motions, but you still try to do it in a straight line as good as you can. It would be the first optimization. Now, second optimization we already talked about, don't confirm your kill. Go to the next target regardless if you have killed it or not. Really get into the habit of checking your crosshair before you are clicking for this type of scenarios. And you might say, yeah, well, it's different than playing in-game, right? If you play Overwatch or Valorant or whatever, or Counter-Strike, you click. You don't confirm targets, you don't have the time to confirm, right? That's true. But what we are doing here is you make a big flick, and you try already to land on target, and then you are missed. For example, I missed by this distance, and then by checking across the position, you tell the brain, oh, you missed by this distance, and this triggers neural adaptation, because you recognize you made a mistake. You want to be more precise with the first big flick, and this trains neural adaptation. Then the second thing is, after the big flick, which is the first training basically, you do this micro correction, and this needs to be a really clean movement. Like, shouldn't be like something like this or whatever. It needs to be really clean. And if you can't do it clean first, slow down, don't go for high score runs yet. Just do this benchmark run as training to get into the habit of clean technique first, because you need this to trigger your training, basically. Now, the third mistake I see sometimes is people making is cheating their own training. So they, instead of big flick into the area and hitting, they kind of make a big flick and they kind of just slow down in the end. So you don't have a clear 1-2 motion, you have like a motion, not a dum-dum, but like it's really hard to show. So they kind of don't go as fast as they can with the big flicks. They kind of increase the speed and then they slow down a little bit, but it's kind of more like a one motion with a acceleration and the acceleration step, which are kind of really dragged out, more or less. And as you can see, you can still play it this way. It also kind of works. But we want to go for the other technique where you make the first big flick as fast and precise as you can. And then make this micro correction motion. And this technique change is basically called a Bardos, or take the Bard pill. You will find it's another YouTuber very famous for this technique, and you might want to look his video up about how to play static scenarios. So he was basically rank 1 for some time on a small target static clicking, yeah, well, and he basically defined this Bardos method of big flick, small micro, big flick, small micro correction. You can do it without, but it just kind of looks unclean, and you don't have a clear definition of, well, what should you actually increase? Where can you try to go faster? Where have you been imprecise? Like, then you just have some sloppy motion, and then it's hard to define what you are actually doing. Right, because remember, we are training mouse control, mostly. Okay, so if you have any other mistakes you're making and you want to have some ideas how to correct them, just feel free to comment. Any other question, also just comment, or feel free to ask me live on stream. I'm streaming on Twitch, so stop by, say hi, show me your questions, I will gladly answer them. Or show me Haskell runs, I will also look at them. Yeah, and thank you very much for watching. Bye bye, until next time.